tonight, tomorrow, whatever it is, come and talk to me and I'll sort of try and match people up.
And final announcement before we get going is Jono Conway. Over to you, Jono.
Thanks. Yeah, hello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jono Conway. I'm currently at Otago Scientific. And improvements in LiDAR, state-of-the-art mesoscale meteorological modelling, and this idea of inverse modelling, which is pushing into the boundary layer closer to the surface, and really see if we can make a system that allows us to infer aerosol emission maps at high spatial and temporal resolution. So I mean, we're thinking daily sub-kilometre. Exactly what that is in the end is the sort of the research question as to how far we can push it, but that's the pitch basically, is to use inverse modelling to go from concentrations, measured concentrations, back to emissions, and have this as a somewhat near real-time product where you can get daily maps which you can then take action on. And we're calling this thing MAPIM, or Mapping Air Pollution Emissions, because every good project needs a somewhat horrible acronym. So the idea, inverse modelling. So I guess the concept is to go from measurements we might have of aerosols or other air pollutants. So they might be LiDAR measurements, represented by those by these lines pointing up into the sky. They might be distributed sensor networks at the surface. Combinations of different quality and density of those measurements to then get the aerosol concentration field. That might be a 2D map or a 3D map. And then from there to go through inverse modelling to what our emissions are. So, and I'm not an inverse modelling expert, so don't hold me to any of this. But from what I know about it, we use a forward model to simulate the particular amount of concentrations from a priori emissions map. So we start with our best guess at what the emissions are. We run an air pollution model forward in time with the meteorology and predict what the concentrations are. So essentially go from emissions to concentrations in the model world. And then the inverse model inverts that forward model and finds a combination of parameters, in this case it's the emissions, that best match the concentrations that we see in the real world and the knowledge of what those spatial variations might be. And basically you iterate on that until you get the best match, the best emissions field in the model world that matches the concentrations you measure in the real world. So you're running this forward model. You might have the same prescribed meteorology, but then you're running different dispersion model runs with different emissions fields until they match, and that results in your retrieved emissions map. So an example from work that Sarah McLaughlin-Fletcher's done on carbon emissions. So here's an example of the prior. So this is the estimated emissions of carbon dioxide, and that's, I just pulled it out of a paper last night, but I think it would have been estimated from land use type and things like that and vegetation. And so then they run a model with the measured concentrations from 2 different areas and with the meteorology. And this is what you come up with. This is the retrieved map. So this is now an enhanced best guess at what the emissions actually are. And you can see those two are quite substantially different.
How many CO2 measuring sites were there?
I think this study was two, right? I think one in central Canterbury and one in
Lauder and
was that in Lauder? Okay, there you go. So from two measurement sites, you can change the map from that to that for CO2. Now, I mean, CO2 is a different beast, different scale, different processes going on, but you can see the value for CO2 there, and this has changed the way we think about indigenous vegetation and stuff like that. So really good for creating research questions as well. And so the idea is to then apply that to urban air quality. And so this is, say, an example. This is work I did 8 years ago in Dunedin, just with the density of wood burners in Dunedin by census area unit. So this is sort of a proxy for this spatial distribution, spatial density of wood burner emissions, say. So this might be our prior emissions map, and then we run the inverse modeling system, and we're going to get a different answer, spatially resolved emissions map. So some of the science in terms of the forward model meteorology, the plan is to use WRF at this stage to go from sort of synoptic to a mesoscale, so kilometre scale, probably something like that, with some nested domains to generate our wind field. We can run traces inside of that. We'll toy with the idea of using WRF Chem, but whether we need to do that for particular matter, sure. We'll also look at TAPM as well as an option for dispersion modelling. And so WRF can then provide those boundary conditions to an external trajectory model, or to TAPM, or to PALM. Now, PALM is a new large eddy simulation model which can handle, so it's explicitly resolving sort of the large eddies, basically. So the features that are sub-kilometre turbulent structures that we know are there, but that are parameterized in something like WRF, we can take that away and have finer scale features that are resolved in our wind flow. And PALM can go down to the sort of building scale. And this is just an example from a PALM new paper on the new urban boundary layer scheme in PALM, showing the velocity field around some buildings. So you can get down to sort of 2 meter resolution and resolving a building weight here and see the airflow coming down and circulating. Now that's pushing the edge of what the boundary layer schemes can do in something like in PALM, but we'd like to use to try and push the forward model as far as we can go, knowing that we have WRF there as sort of our gold standard, which we know we can get to sort of hundreds of meters resolution on a grid for the meteorology, without including things like building lakes. So just another example from Palm. It's got an online chemistry module in there now. So this is just a 2 tracer with different sources of sinks and some buildings here, and you can see in the way that that's affected around the buildings. So it's state of the art. It might be overkill. We'll see. So a big part of the science is to do a field campaign to validate this and to provide the boundary conditions for the model. So at the moment we're thinking Timaru, and I just found this online this morning. This is most of Timaru with some of the areas where they deployed 20 mote sensors, and someone from Mote here today, I think, maybe. Anyway, so they had a field campaign last year. Environment Canterbury had a field campaign last year and put out 20 different sensors. And so the plan is to extend on that and put in some odins, put in more meteorology, and to develop a sort of rich test bed of real world data with which to test really how the quality and availability of the measurements, both particulate and meteorology, how that impacts on the retrieval that we get from it. And so with something like Timaru, it's a smaller area. We can have a higher density. Say we have 50 odins, they can be at a higher sort of spatial resolution than if we went to somewhere like Christchurch. But we're still toying with it may well go to Christchurch. So we had our first meeting last week, and it's one of the things to rapidly resolve. So as I said, the goal of the field campaign is to provide this data to explore these trade-offs between having a whole lot of low-cost sensors to having, say, a smaller number of medium-quality sensors, these ES642s, which Mote has and ECAN has, which they had last year. So sort of if you can afford 20 of those, are you better to have 20 mid-cost sensors? Are you better to have 50 low-cost sensors? I don't know, you better to have 100 ultra low cost sensors. Are you better to have one micropulse LiDAR there, which is giving you a vertical or maybe scanning, giving a 3D field, but not at the surface. So what combination of measurements gives you the best retrieval? And also, what meteorological data do you need to have confidence in the forward model and the meteorology that's being generated? So we'll definitely have we'll have multiple weather stations. We'll have some sort of vertical information, either from helikiting, radio sondes, maybe a SODAR, if we can find somewhere that the neighbours aren't going to be annoyed by it, and maybe some boundary layer turbulence measurements as well, just to see if they can be useful in terms of validating or running the model. So so sort of the key science questions I guess we want to answer through this project are how the uncertainties in the meteorological fields affect our confidence in the emissions maps. How sensitive are those maps to our choice of the forward model? So different using Lagrangian or Eulerian dispersion modeling. How does the spatial and temporal resolution of the aerosol measurements that we have affect the uncertainties? And we can do that both in the model space and in the measurement space. So in the model space, we can use what's called observing system sensitivity experience, I think, Aussies. And so you can sample your concentration field, then you have those measurements, and then run your retrieval, and then do a different sample. And so you can experiment with different combinations of hypothetical measurement networks to see which gives you what's the best design to get the best retrieval for the least amount of money. So I guess that's the question. If you were investing money in a sensor network, where would you invest it to get the best retrieve maps? And so what combination of these different sensor technologies do you need? A combination of both, and you get away with one or the other. And then sort of trying to get at the validation of this, so we have these bottom-up emissions inventories, but how good are they? And so, and what value are the retrieved maps adding? So if we average the emissions maps that we get from the system out of it over a long enough time, get rid of the small scale fields, then we should have something that's comparable to a emissions inventory. And then we can look and we can see is there fine scale sort of features in there that we know occur in real life. Can we quantify the emissions that occur for different weather conditions? And to what extent do outer domain emissions, so burning, say, in agricultural areas surrounding, to what extent do they influence the concentrations inside the domain? So in terms of who's all involved, it's led by Greg Boddicker. We've got Gus and Ian and Mike involved from NIWA, myself, and then we've got Laura and Marwan from University of Canterbury. So they'll be sort of handling the forward modelling side of things, and then Sarah Nicola-Fletcher and Stephanie both from both Scientific will be doing the inverse modelling. We've got Basic Khan, who's been working on Palm, who'll be providing advice on that, and then Philip Takola from Sigma Space. So they have contacts into Asia with the micropulse LiDAR. So that's sort of kind of a bit of the target market. So it's New Zealand problems, but also thinking internationally. How can this technology be used overseas? And we're just pulling, we've got Tim Mallett from ECAN involved, and just pulling in Nicholas Cullen to be involved with the measurement campaign. There'll hopefully be a couple of students there. So just to recap, so the pitch is to develop a system to infer particular emissions maps from the concentration measurements from a range of different instrument types. So so we use the forward model to go from a prior to concentrations, and then we used inverse modeling to then figure out what the emissions really were. And there's a modeling component, a measurement component, and we expect a new company will emerge from all of this to deploy it in other areas. And that's about as long as I can talk about something that we haven't done anything on.
Great. We certainly have time for a couple of questions about.
The different sources of particles. So, like how much in your emission in your emission inventory that you're verifying.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
example, you'll know how much is from cars or
Yeah,
anything. So do you think with your inverse modelling, you'll be able to sort of go down to, or are you just really going to be able to do a general PM 2.5 across this city?
I don't think I don't think there'll be separate sort of traces essentially for different sources, but I think we will be able to get to that where there's quite distinct, say, hourly profiles of emissions and quite different geographic areas. Like in Timaru, there's a port again, and so that's quite a distinct source, has quite a distinct, quite a different signature in terms of where it is and what the emissions look like, you know, larger point source emissions, basically. And so I think it will be able to start getting at things like that. Certainly, yeah.
There's a desire in the future. At the moment, it's based on PM measurements, but there's a desire in the future to add other species, and I think you'll get more of that sort of compositional source ID at that stage.
Yeah, so yeah, we don't have any sort of explicit source apportionment work plan for that in terms of the measurements. It is just simply PM 2.5.
Great. One other thing. So you mentioned Tappan. So
Yes.
you might want to contact Ashok Luha because he's recently done a project where we used Tappan to look at inverse modelling for methane emissions from the coal seam gas area.
Oh,
so,
cool.
And I've often said to him, when are we going to be able to do particles with this? And he's like, oh, it's really hard.
Yeah.
So that'll be really good to sort of have a chat with him about his experience with it.
Yeah.
I think if you, in terms of sources, depending on the time of day that you can see various activities happening. Like if it is during the day, then obviously it might be traffic in the location. Whereas if it's nighttime, then you can kind of see that it's probably more of a perhaps wood burning or something like that. So that's what we've found in the past too. Depending on the time of day that you see these things happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's the time variation in the map, which is the clue for the sources.
Yep. And that would be quite valuable to the.
Yeah, and certainly the modelling is going to have to occur on that sort of time scale. Hourly. It's not a daily sort of just daily average it and get a sensible picture out of it.
Right. Thanks, Jono. We'll move on to our next talk, who is Ajit. And this is Woody's, is it?
This is Woody's.
Right, great. Okay.
So good morning. Yesterday we saw what's in the AI in of different origin, chemical origin, and biological origin. They are emitted from anthropogenic activity as well as human activity. So once in the air, So these particulates, which originally from chemical or biological origin, they may interact with different meteorological conditions. They can be transported from one region to the other based on their size. And the recent study found that exposure to this PM10 and the PM2.5 from biological and chemical origin may result in significant effects, including mortality, asthma, lung cancer, and so on. As I said, this particulate matter is not a single pollutant, but is a mixture of different biological, viruses, bacteria, and fungi, and different chemical composition. In my research, I don't look all of the composition, but I look those which of the greatest health concern. For chemical side, I look on polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon and then their nitroderivative because of their carcinogenicity and mutagenicity on human health. For biological side, I focus on pathogenic bacteria and pathogenic fungi, also because of their greatest health on human health. So those are the main focus. I don't look to other composition. So that's why I start doing a research, especially in these components. In Africa, there's still a data gap, especially in air pollution. So this is the map, I think, released by the World Health Organization, where there is monitoring, continuous monitoring of PM10. But if you look on Africa continent, it's blank. It's almost few monitoring. Some is in South Africa, a little bit in west of Africa, but the entire continent, we still don't have any monitoring. Even those are also available, which are sometimes satellite estimates. They show that this PM10 or PM2.5 are more higher than the World Health Organization standard. So as I'm focusing on this carcinogenic compound, PAH and the NPAH, in Africa, we only have 2 reports. I have only 1 report in Algeria, which has been also done for a few compounds. We have also another in Egypt. So my third research, which I have done last year, so it will be the third report talking about this polycyclic aromatic and their nitroderivatives. So last year I went in Africa, in Rwanda. So for those who are not familiar with African continent, so Rwanda, it's located in East Africa. So it's a small country, landlocked, which is highly populated per density. So of 12 million population now. I do my sampling in different 3 locations of different land use. So including urban background, rural site, and also urban road site. So this is general workflow of my experimental design. I collected this PM2.5 and PM10 using high volume air sampler, which has a flow rate of 1,000 liters per minute. So after the collection, I correct the samples in the lab. I do gravimetric analysis to see the level of concentration of this particulate. And then I cut the filter into 2 main parts. So one part, analyze it for chemical composition. Another half of I analyze it for biological composition. And then all I do perform several statistical analysis to find any possible correlation between this chemical and biological, because it's really hard to come up with experiment which can analyze these chemical and biological together, because they have differences in terms of sampling, time, machine, and so on. So that's why I try to use the same sampler, same site, same sampling dilation, and then take the filter, cut into the half, and I use one half for chemical, another half for biological, and then try to look possible correlation, and then do interpretation of different chemical and biological. This is the result. So this is a seasonal variation of pH in Africa, in Rwanda. So the first one is a different site, rural, urban background, and urban roadside. So the red is PM 2.5, and then the black is PM 10, and these bars, those are pH and NPH. You can see in the region down. So what I found here, the mean concentration, the 24 hours mean of PM 2.5 and then PM 10 exceed the World Health Organization. So if you look, which is the 25 microgram per cubic meter for PM 2.5, you can see how all of the sites exceed this standard. This is same goes to PM 10, which is more above 50 microgram per cubic meter as the standard of WHO. A pH concentration was found significantly high, and this is a dry season, and this is blue one, it's a wet season. So we have only 2 seasons in Rwanda. So it was significantly high in the dry season than in a wet season. And also, if you compare rural, the urban background, and urban roadside, so urban roadside, the highest concentration of this compound was really found in urban roadside, followed by rural site because of wood burning, and then the last was in an urban background, which is a residential health area where they cook using only electricity and gas. So the same trend was found also for NPH. So, and these are also our free site. NPH as well, the highest concentration was found in urban roadside compared to urban background and the rural site. So the rural site now was really small compared to urban background because those of NPHs, they are emitted from vehicle emissions. So in rural site was not very high compared to urban roadside. The most important, this compound significantly decreased during holidays, weekend, and a car-free day. In Rwanda, we used to have a car-free day every Sunday of the last month. So normally the government initiates this car-free day as a mass exercise. So where there was everyone, go stop. There is no car which can drive in the entire city. So all the population have to go do sport. So, and that happened only on Sunday. So during this time, I was sampling, and then I found air pollution, this particulate, has been decreased more than 30% during only one day where there was no car in the city. And this is also was found during some of these stars means there was a holiday and a weekend. So you will find all of the drops here, which was found was during holiday. So now how you can expect the issue, especially in the urban roadside, of vehicle emission, because any day where there was no vehicle, or you can see the trend has been significantly decreased. And this is, I think I recently wrote a report to the government showing the significance of the car-free day, but now it's not, the government has also said, okay, now how about having now car-free day, not only once a month, maybe 2 weeks, and then we apply for the entire country because it was only in the capital city. So now they are having a car-free day twice a month, and it's happening in the whole country. So which was also a positive from this research. So I tried to do a source analysis of where this particulate matter and pHs and NPH came from. I use the diagnostic relation from NPH to pH concentration relation, because these polycyclic, they are emitted through combustion. So through the combustion temperature, I know the combustion temperature of diesel, gasoline, wood burning, so I can easily identify the sources using the diagnostic relation, and I perform different multivariate analysis using principal component analysis, and then I found diesel and gasoline was the major sources of this particulate in urban site, while wood burning was dominating the rural site. You can also tell flow here because some of the species of this compound, they are originally emitted some from, say, from wood burning. If you look this arsenic, you find it was dominant in the rural, and this is arsenic is the traces of wood burning. So this is also same to other compound. You can also easily identify the sources of this compound. I do 3-day back trajectory analysis as well, because it's a landlocked country, but we have different countries around. So we found the highest concentration recorded in the rural area coincided with biomass burning or coming from South Africa. So while the lowest concentration recorded showed that the air masses was locally. So assuming that this compound may have been also have an influence of long-range transport. I calculate carcinogenic risk assessment of this compound because they are mostly carcinogenic and mutagenic. So in all of the 3 sites, it exceeds World Health Organization, and especially this is a concern in urban road sites where they can be a definite risk based on a US APA. When I was landing in Queenstown, I got this message that this research, which has been published. So Sunday, when I was landing in Queenstown, I got the email from Environmental and Technology that has been accepted. This research, which has been sent in a couple of months ago. So for biological components, 1/2 of the filter, which analyze for fungi and bacteria. So I do different DNA extraction step. I do several techniques to try to find a concentration which can be quantified. So I do quantification, PCR, and then I use my SIG platform, do several bioinformatics to look also different biological component we have in this another half of the filter. So far, I'm still on the step of analyzing biological, but I only have the result up to the phylum level, which in the next couple of days, I'll be continuing to the species and also look at the different analysis. So far, what I found, Proteobacteria was the most dominant in the whole particulate in Rwanda. It's dominant in PM2.5, while the Firmicutes and the Actinobacteria was dominant in PM10, and this Firmicute was dominant in the rural site compared to the urban site. So, and this is all I found. This Actinobacteria and Cyanobacteria, they dominated urban site, while the Firmicute dominated the rural site. So I'm trying to do a next analysis now, trying to calculate this correlation. So for my next work, which I will start actually after these conferences, because I came after analyzing this. So I'll be investigating the spatiotemporal diversity and the community composition of these pathogenic fungi and bacteria which are associated with this PM2.5 and then PM10 in Rwanda. In New Zealand as well, I have the result, but I'm still waiting to do some analysis. I try to develop a methodology which will be used to analyze those composition together, and then analyzing also the fungi sequence data which I have. So as a conclusion, so Rwanda has air pollution problem, but there is a lack of the data. So this is the first empirical research which has been done probably in Sub-Sahara. So this PM2.5, PM10 greatly exceed WHO standard. We found excellent correlation of air quality and human activity during holiday, car-free days, and so on. And then vehicle wood burning, those are the major sources in the city and the rural location, respectively. Carcinogenic risk exceed the World Health Organization. These airborne bacteria communities and these organic aerosol, they are associated with these particulates. So this may provide reliable data for studying the response of human when there is increasing level of air pollution in Rwanda. So immediate emission control is required, especially not only in Rwanda, but also in the whole sub-Saharan African countries, because they have the same issue. As a recommendation, the most we found will be international collaboration, because getting money, getting funding to do installation, different monitoring is still an issue. This cost me more than 10K to bring all of the high volume sampler to conduct research in Africa. So I found we need some international collaboration to do some monitoring. So what I'm starting, I went to this Aerosol company. I purchased a lot of sensors, low-cost sensors. I brought it in Africa, and then to see if you use low-cost sensors, we can have a real picture of air pollution. Now I have put sensors in different areas of the country, and then try to compare with my high volume air sample results, and then see in case we don't have fund for using this high volume air sampler, see if we, for lower air costs, we can have some picture of air pollution in other area, because this will recover some few regions in the country. Where technology, as they're applying everywhere, I think also will be important in Africa, although still some have a problem with electricity, but still Africa is urbanizing quickly, which I think in next future as well, this will be happen. There is an issue of infrastructure for walking and as well for cycling. We find even in short distance, everyone is driving a private car because there is no infrastructure for walking and cycling. So we asked the government if they could do some infrastructure, which is where in Rwanda now they have been established different car-free zone. So all the population can freely go, a car can be stopped out of the city, which has now have a significant impact on the air pollution concentration. Street regulation important of used vehicle, because mostly vehicles found in Africa, they are second-hand, more than 10 years old. So this is also an issue. In Rwanda as well, they have banned importation of these old vehicles. They have now have a collaboration with Volkswagen manufacturer to set an industry in the country so that population will be able for next future to buy the new car instead of using those second-hand use. So thank you so much.
Woody in the room? I was over there. Woody, you on? While Woody gets set up, we've got time for a quick question.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'll cut a couple of points. I think these carless days sound like an ideal opportunity for doing studies. How exhaustive is it? I mean, are there trains and buses running on carless days, or is it just cars that don't run? I mean, what proportion of the vehicle emissions is cut out by having the carless days?
Well, yeah, as you know, in Africa, we don't even have this infrastructure of train and I mean highways like here. So we found because of the infrastructure, they only have mostly it's private cars and buses. Just they're not that much. And then because of such an infrastructure, you find the distance they can run is 40 kilometers. That's actually the highest speed they can run in Africa. So yes, we still have that problem, but there is a compilation now. Start to see if we can have a train for mass transportation, so which we expect to have in the future. Yeah.
The carless days is 90% of the emissions are gone, are they?
Yes, not all, because if you look in these developing countries, the combination, you can't tell like vehicle emissions or wood burning. Those are like pretty much all dominant, even the city and the urban location as well. But there is in the city, the cars, they are mostly dominant because of emission, but the poor maintain of the cars as well. So no one is looking the maintenance, whatever you have.
No, my question is, on the carless days,
Yes.
you know, you've got a certain emission from vehicles.
Yes.
On ordinary days. On the carless days, how much does that background emission from cars go down by? Does it go to zero?
Oh, no, zero.
Or 50%?
They can decrease more than up to 40%, according to my research.
About
40%. Because one day, which there was no car in the city, the emission can decrease to 40%, which on next day, after next day, they can still go to the same standard where the vehicle continue the normal activities.
So your results show that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, we're slightly behind schedule, so I'm going to move on from one developing city to another. There we go. Over to Woody.
Hi, I'm presenting this on behalf of Nick Talbot from Auckland Council. He thought this conference was a couple of weeks away from today, so I've just received this at 8 o'clock this morning. So yeah, I'm just kind of winging it, and we'll see how we go. Tomorrow I'm going to be scuba diving off the west coast of the South Island. Where are we? Well, there are quite a few sharks, so I'm just going to be thinking of the sharks as I go through this. So this presentation is on key results from Auckland's new emission inventory, based on some modelling that's being done, and some results from the C40 congestion cordon modelling, and talking about traffic impacts within the CBD. I guess I should introduce myself. I work for Moat Limited, and one of my key responsibilities is looking after the Auckland Council monitoring network. I spend most of my time unhealthily preoccupied about the quality of the instruments, and less time thinking about the social and policy implications of that. So I'm trying to kind of get in tune for that for this presentation. Right, so these are the emission inventory. This is the emission inventory makeup for 2016. So it's kind of what you'd expect. The bulk of the gases coming from transport, and the PM and the VOCs from domestic heating, burning of fires. So there's quite a lot less from industry. So this is the emission inventory 2016 versus 2011, and the key thing here is that most things are going down slightly, but there's a slight increase in SO2 from transport for Auckland City. This is a slide showing the proportional changes. So the key thing here is that there is very little change across the years between 2011 and 2016 for NOx, PM 2.5, and SO2. So this is the long-term trends from back in 2001 to 2016. It's, as you can see, there is a decreasing long-term trend in PM10, NOx, and PM2.5. Similarly for SO2, but since 2011, it started to go up again. This slide is on the context for considering a congestion charge of $10. So with the CBD being the economic and social heart of Auckland, which also has quite a rapidly expanding population, now has 53,000 people living in downtown Auckland, mostly in apartments, obviously, and also about 75,000 people commuting into the CBD every day. So in terms of exposures to population, it's quite a high number of people being in the area where we've got the worst pollution concentrations for PM2.5 and for NO2. So the bar chart there just shows the urban background and citywide versus Queen Street, and you can see that it's sort of about five times higher for NO2 and slightly higher for PM2.5. That's 10-year annual averaged concentrations. This slide here is on the context of installing a $10 congestion charge. A little more information about shipping emissions contributing 5% of PM2.5 and 10% of black carbon at Queen Street. And the fact that industrial sources account for just 11% of PM2.5 across Auckland. We have 38,000 private vehicle journeys into the CBD each month, and diesel emissions account for 40% and 60% of black carbon in the CBD. And around 10 million pedestrians were counted in 2017 as an estimate. So this is about the C40 modelling impacts of bringing in this congestion charge and the benefits of an estimated reduction in concentrations when you remove 11,000 vehicles. So we get a 4% reduction for PM2.5 and 15% reduction for NO2.
How many vehicles come in currently?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it was around 30,000 per day. Sorry, 38,000, yeah. So Auckland Council have been working with C40 in London to model these congestion change impacts. I guess the key thing here in the council looking at this is there hasn't been much of a change in the emissions profile across the whole city in the past 10 years. So this is an area that can be targeted and has quite an impact. Okay, so the difference between PM10 and NO2 is largely due to the number of diesel buses, and obviously contributes a very high percentage of black carbon as well. So that's one of the aspects that this sort of policy will target. So the social and economic impact from these reductions, basically there's no effect at all for PM2.5 in terms of deaths and life expectancy, but an NO2 reduction will see an approximate reduction in 6 deaths annually, and increase the life expectancy of folks living there by 31 days. And the economic impact is sort of about $1 billion a year. Sorry, 1 million.
And 51 cents.
It's quite blurry, isn't it? Okay. So the take-home message is removing 11,000 cars will reduce NO2 by far more than PM 2.5. But obviously there will be benefits in terms of black carbon reductions as well when you're targeting PM 2.5. A 15% reduction in NO2 will prolong everyone's life expectancy by 31 days, and NO2 is a better metric to look at to assess vehicle impacts rather than PMX. So over to black carbon now. This is some work by Perry Davey and Bill Trumpeter, who is here. Hi, Bill. From 2017, so it's quite recent. This is source portion by filter data measurements. I should just point out that there used to be fairly routine filter collection of both PM 2.5 and PM 10 down at Queen Street, but now that there's a continuous optical instrument there, we only do PM 10 filter measurements, which are collected every 6 days. So we've got less comprehensive source apportionment information now, but there's enough to go on historically, and there's plenty more collected at other sites across Auckland. So basically 39% of vehicles make up the PM 2.5 concentrations, and for black carbon it's 66%. So the bulk of it, with everything else coming from the various mixture in the urban atmosphere. Right, so why this is important? Well, it's important because when you take the annual average, or the variation annual average for the past 10 years across monitoring networks around the world, you can see that for Auckland Council, it's quite a lot. For the Auckland City, sorry, it's quite a lot higher than anywhere else in the rest of the world, with the exception of China. So this is a similar. These other networks are similar sort of networks for collecting black carbon concentrations from around the world. And at Queen Street, the annual average varies between 2.3 and 5.3 micrograms compared to sort of less than 1 microgram at most for most other monitoring networks and other developed areas of the world, but compared to developing country like China, we're only sort of around half or less of what China measures in their cities. So that's
of their minimum, half of their minimum.
Yeah.
Their range from 93 to 142, isn't it?
No, 14.2. Yeah. No,
Oh, sorry,
14.2. Yeah, no,
I just don't believe that. I mean,
right.
Auckland is not comparable with China.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a fair comment.
Because you're comparing a city with a whole country,
Yes.
rather than a city in that country.
That's right. No, I completely agree with you. And I mean, I didn't put these slides together, and I haven't looked at the research. I mean, this is obviously a meta-analysis of other studies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
I
also
can't really defend that. Sorry.
It also depends on where that site's located. If it's located right next to a road and there's lots of diesel trucks going along there, then of course the black carbon's going to be high.
Obviously, it's not comparing apples with apples.
No,
That's the
really,
problem.
yeah.
So it's, I mean, you just have to look at China to see that it's going to be at least 100 times worse than Auckland.
That's right. Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, that's something that needs more discussion and investigation. And comparing one site with another is problematic just in one city or in a small town, let alone internationally. But it's difficult to do, depending on there's so much error in the measurement, the types of instrumentation that's used, and all that sort of thing. So.
But this would just be looking at local exposures. So that's, the instrument there was right on Queen Street. But they've since moved the bus route from the buses don't go down Queen Street anymore, so it's actually come down a bit since probably in the last year or two, wasn't it?
These are electric buses.
As well.
That's right. Well, I mean, that's what we're coming to, and ultimately, this is sort of about driving the point across and guiding policy change rather than getting down to the nitty gritty of the comparisons. Right. So this is just sort of an overview of the key inputs of black carbon in the city. Obviously, the bus system is a key target in this work. It makes up over 12% of on-road traffic circulating up and down in terms of the traffic flow. But as Bill pointed out, a large proportion of these trips have been shifted further up, a couple of blocks, I think, north of Queen Street.
Yep. Right.
So 12% from the buses, and then there's the predominant southwesterly, which brings the wind flow sort of down from the top of the hill through the street canyon, and then you can have the complex changes that are happening in a street canyon environment where you get stagnation and vortexes and different flows, which can see cause concentrations to be quite a lot higher on one side of the street canyon versus the other, and all of these things going on. And oftentimes I must say that Queen Street is quite well ventilated, and the concentrations of PM and black carbon are fairly low. There's no permanent continuous black carbon instrument at Queen Street at the moment because it's on a rooftop and there are weight limitations, but we're thinking about ways of getting a sample line up there so we can measure black carbon continuously, and also other things like PM1 and ultrafine particles. So yeah, we've got that airflow effect, and right at the bottom there you've got Britomart bus station and the ports. So that's obviously also one of the most heavily used areas in Auckland in terms of pedestrian shopping. So I think if you were to have real-time displays of what the pollution levels were like down there, especially for NO2, which is very close to the NES on the hourly exceedance level quite frequently. Yeah, sorry, Ian.
No, just 2 minutes. That's all.
Oh, 2 minutes, right.
I had a question.
Go for it.
Recently, Auckland changed all their bus routes and things like that. Did they consult the emissions map or look at how their new kind of routes would affect that? Because, for example, the bus is not going down Queen Street. There's that little turn around Britomart and then kind of go down that really small street. So I would expect that if you put a monitor there, you'd have high emissions or high rates there because they sit there and the buses are idling, sometimes 3 or 4 buses in a row. So if you reduced it at Queen Street, but creating other areas.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm not sure of the purpose for shifting the bus route, but there is some work going.
Categorically, the answer is no. Bus routes are not designed on basis of emissions inventories and air quality.
They didn't factor that in,
No.
I'm sure. But that I don't know what street it is, but when you cross from the train station, there's a little corridor, because sometimes if I take that bus, there's like 10 buses in a short spot, and you don't even want to sit there for 5 minutes because.
That's right. They don't turn the buses off. They're just sitting there idling. There's a lot of construction going on with the new link up underground as well in Auckland City. Right. So just getting back to it. The relevance for this and policy decision making. These are a number of programs, commitments that I'm actually not familiar with, so I can't answer any questions on them, but I'm mostly not familiar with them because it's more Auckland Council policy stuff. But Auckland's fossil-free commitment, the city centre master plan refresh, the downtown program, transport alignment project, and the Safer Streets approach, and Ports of Auckland sustainability plan, and the construction of Auckland City rail link, which I mentioned just before. So following on from your question there in terms of better monitoring in the downtown, there's going to be a low-cost sensor network in Auckland at some point. We're just sort of trialing various instruments at the moment, one being a Vaisala AQT 420 and considering an Aerosol AQY as well. The idea is obviously to have better representation of where people actually are during the day and you know, correlate and calibrate those measurements back with the reference site at Queen Street up on the roof there, which I said has poses some problems because of weight and space limitations, but ideally we'd like to have CO and SO2 monitored there continuously, as well as NOx, as well as aerosols. So I just skipped one slide there, but this is basically where all this research is hopefully leading to. It'll be these zero emissions areas which are planned out and under consideration, but we may be looking at a possibility of pedestrianising Lower Queen Street in the near future. But I think it's all kind of up in the air at the moment, and we need more evidence to make it happen. And yeah, that's it. Any questions? Hi.
The SO2 increase, do you have an idea what you think that's due? Is it due to the shipping in the ports?
Yeah, it sure is. Sorry, I didn't actually touch on that. Yeah, it is. It's changes in sulfur reductions to fuels over the past 10 years, not just in vehicle fuels, but also in some of the shipping fuels, which have lowered the overall background level. But you know, with everything else, the electrification of some buses and other things that are helping lower transport, on-road transport contributions overall, then basically as we do that more and more, the SO2 signal from the ports will increase, and it is a concern.
The ports probably wouldn't want to hear it, but if you actually did that study where you're talking about reducing congestion charge, did it and then moving the port, I think the effect from that would be higher.
That's right.
It'd be great to be able to do that experiment, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was under consideration by politicians for a while, thinking about moving it to 4A. So it'll be an interesting space to watch, and hopefully we'll have adequate instrumentation and adequate representation across the area.
All right, we're just slightly behind schedule, about 10 minutes behind schedule, but it's morning tea, so if we come back, say 15 minutes or so, then Martin will be taking over for the next session. Thanks very much.
Oh, cheers. Sorry about that. That was totally last minute. Absolutely. You did well. You did well. That's fine.
You did well. There's my talk on there yet? I'll put it back to that other thing.